In the bustling streets of Queens, New York, Grace Delaney hurried along the sidewalk, her worn sneakers pounding against the pavement. She was 25, an orphan scraping by on a part-time job that barely paid the bills. Today was her chance to change that. She had an interview at Bright Future Designs, a small design firm that could finally give her a stable income. Her dark hair bounced as she clutched a folder with her resume, her heart racing with hope. She needed this job, not just for herself, but to save the little house her grandmother had left her, a house now drowning in debt. At $300,000, the loan she had taken to keep it was a weight she could hardly bear. But then, just a block from the subway, she saw her. An older woman, frail and silver-haired, had stumbled on the uneven pavement. Her grocery bag spilled apples and cans across the street, and no one stopped to help. Grace froze. The clock was ticking, her interview just 20 minutes away. She could keep walking, pretend she hadn't seen. But something in the woman's tired eyes pulled at her. With a sigh, Grace dropped to her knees, gathering the scattered items. The woman smiled weakly, her hands trembling as she tried to stand. Grace offered her arm, steadying her. "Thank you, dear," the woman said, her voice soft but warm. Not many would stop these days. Grace brushed it off with a shy grin. "It's nothing. Are you okay?" "I'm fine now, thanks to you." "I'm Eleanor, but you can call me Ellie." "Grace?" she replied, glancing at her watch. Her stomach sank. The interview was slipping away, but Ellie's grateful nod made it hard to regret her choice. They chatted briefly, Ellie explaining she liked walking alone in Queens to feel normal, away from her usual life. Grace didn't pry, assuming she was just a lonely retiree. Before parting, Ellie pressed a crumpled note into Grace's hand. "Come see me tomorrow at the Brooklyn Senior Home. I'd love to thank you properly." Grace nodded, pocketing the note, and rushed off. She reached Bright Future Designs 10 minutes late, breathless and apologetic. The receptionist barely looked up. "Sorry, they've already picked someone else." Grace's heart dropped, but she forced a smile and left. That night, in her tiny apartment, she stared at the peeling walls, wondering how she'd keep her grandmother's house. The $300,000 debt loomed larger than ever. The next day, curious and with nothing to lose, Grace took the subway to the Brooklyn Senior Home. It was a modest place, filled with the hum of conversation and the scent of antiseptic. Ellie greeted her at the entrance, her eyes lighting up. "You came! I knew you would." She led Grace inside, past residents playing cards, to a quiet corner where a man sat reading a newspaper. He was about 30, with sharp features and a casual air, dressed in a faded jacket and jeans. A beat-up bike helmet rested on the table beside him. "Grace, this is my grandson, Henry Caldwell," Ellie said, her tone playful. "Henry, meet the girl who saved me yesterday." Henry lowered the paper, his green eyes meeting Grace's. "Saved you? What's this about?" Ellie chuckled. "Oh, don't be modest, Grace. She missed a big opportunity to help me pick up my groceries. Most people would have walked right by." Grace shifted, uneasy under Henry's gaze. "It wasn't a big deal. It was to me," Ellie insisted. "Henry, why don't you two chat? I'll grab us some tea." She shuffled off, leaving them alone. Henry leaned back, folding the paper. "So, you're the hero of the day. What do you do, Grace?" She hesitated. "Not much right now. I was supposed to have a job interview, but, well, I missed it." "Tough break," he said, his tone light. "I'm between jobs myself. No car, no fancy place, just getting by." He tapped the helmet. "This bike's my only ride." Grace smiled faintly, relaxing a little. He seemed ordinary, like her. They talked about small things, the weather, the city, until Ellie returned with tea. But as Grace sipped hers, Ellie dropped a bombshell. "Henry needs someone good in his life, Grace. I think you'd get along." Henry coughed, nearly spilling his drink. "Grandma, what are you doing?" "Just saying what I see," Ellie replied with a wink. Grace laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Ellie's eyes held a spark, like she had a plan. As Grace left that day, she couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting wasn't random. Henry's easy smile lingered in her mind, and Ellie's words echoed. What did the old woman see in her? She didn't know it yet. But this chance encounter on a Queens street was about to change everything. Grace Delaney couldn't stop thinking about her meeting at the Brooklyn senior home. Ellie Prescott's warm smile and Henry Caldwell's casual charm stuck with her as she rode the subway back to her cramped Queens apartment. She sat on her lumpy couch, staring at the eviction notice pinned to the fridge. Her grandmother's house, a little brownstone in Brooklyn, was slipping away. She had taken out a $300,000 loan to buy it from the bank after her grandmother passed, but the payments were crushing her. Her part-time gig at a coffee shop barely covered rent, let alone the debt. And now, her Uncle Thomas Delaney was circling, ready to swoop in and sell it for a quick profit. The next morning, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Grace, it's Henry. Grandma wants us to meet again. Same place, noon?" She hesitated. Why would Ellie care about her? But with no job prospects and a gnawing curiosity, she agreed. At the senior home, Ellie greeted her with a hug, her silver hair tied back neatly. Henry was there too, leaning against the wall with that same bike helmet in hand. He gave her a small wave, looking almost sheepish. "Grace, I've been thinking," Ellie began, sitting them down at a rickety table. "You're a good soul. Henry here could use someone like you in his life." Henry rolled his eyes. "Grandma, come on. You're embarrassing me." Ellie ignored him, her gaze sharp. "I'm old, Henry. I want to see you settled with someone who's not after money or status. Someone real. Grace fits the bill." Grace blinked, caught off guard. "Me? I don't even know him." "Exactly," Ellie said with a sly grin. "That's why. I've got an idea. Henry, tell her—" Henry rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. "She's got this crazy plan. She thinks we should, get married. Just for a year, like a deal." Grace laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Married? To you? Why?" Ellie leaned forward. "Because I'd pay you, Grace. $300,000. Enough to save that house you're fighting for, right?" Grace's laugh died in her throat. She stared at Ellie, then Henry. "How do you know about my house?" "I asked around," Ellie said simply. "Small world. I hear things. Your uncle's trying to take it and you're drowning in debt. I can help." Grace's mind raced. $300,000 would clear her loan, keep Thomas at bay, but marrying a stranger? She looked at Henry, his green eyes steady but guarded. "And you're okay with this?" He shrugged. "Grandma's stubborn. She thinks you're the real deal, not some gold digger. I'd rather humor her than argue. Plus, I don't mind helping you out." Grace bit her lip. It sounded insane, but the money was a lifeline. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Henry said. "We sign a contract. 1 year, then we split. You get the cash, I keep Grandma happy. No strings." Ellie slid a pen and paper across the table, a makeshift agreement already scribbled out. Grace read it, her hands trembling. 1 year of pretending, and her house would be safe. She glanced at Henry, his casual demeanor oddly reassuring. "Fine," she said finally. "I'm in." They signed it right there, Ellie beaming like she'd won the lottery. Grace felt a mix of relief and unease as Henry shook her hand, his grip firm. "Guess we're hitched," he said with a crooked smile. She nodded, still processing it all. That evening, Grace moved a few things into Henry's tiny rented room near the senior home, a cover to sell the story. It was sparse, just a mattress and a rickety desk, his bike propped in the corner. "Not much, huh?" he said, catching her look. "Told you I'm between jobs." "It's fine," Grace replied, setting down her bag. She didn't care about his stuff. The $300,000 was already wired to her account, courtesy of Ellie. She paid off the loan that night, texting Thomas to back off. He replied with a curt, "We'll see," but for now, the house was hers. Days turned into weeks, and Grace settled into the strange arrangement. Henry was easy to be around, always on that old bike, pedaling through Brooklyn with a grin. He'd joke about their marriage, calling her wifey to make her laugh. She started to like him, his laid-back vibe a contrast to her chaotic life. But then, trouble knocked. One rainy afternoon, Derek Vaughn showed up at her apartment. Her ex, all sharp jaw and sharper temper, stood in the doorway, soaked and angry. "Grace, we need to talk," he said, pushing past her. You owe me." "I owe you nothing," she snapped, crossing her arms. "You took 400,000 from me, half my savings, half a loan I'm still paying off. We're done." Derek smirked, leaning closer. "I need cash, babe. You've got that house now. Sell it, give me a cut, and we're square." Grace stepped back, her pulse racing. "Get out, Derek." He grabbed her arm, his voice low. "You'll regret this." Before she could react, the door swung open again. Henry stood there, rain dripping from his jacket, his eyes narrowing at Derek. "Problem here?" Derek sized him up, scoffing. "Who's this loser?" "Her husband," Henry said coolly, stepping between them. "Let go of her, now." Derek laughed, but released her, backing off. "Husband? You joking? Fine, I'll be back." He stormed out, leaving Grace shaken. Henry shut the door, turning to her. "You okay?" "Yeah," she said, exhaling. "Thanks. He's my ex, a real jerk." "Figured," Henry said, wiping rain from his face. "I'll stick around if he shows up again." Grace nodded, grateful but puzzled. Henry seemed too calm, too sure. She brushed it off, chalking it up to his confidence, but their fake marriage was getting complicated. A few days later, Ellie took a turn for the worse. Grace got a call from the senior home, her voice tight with worry. "She's in the hospital, can you come?" Grace rushed over, finding Ellie in a sterile room hooked to monitors. Henry was already there, his face pale. Grace sat by Ellie's bed, holding her hand as she drifted in and out. "You're good for him," Ellie whispered, squeezing weakly. "I knew it." Grace stayed all night, fetching water, talking softly to keep Ellie calm. Henry watched her, something shifting in his expression. When Ellie stabilized, he pulled Grace aside. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "She's your grandma," Grace replied. "Of course I did." He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment she felt a spark, but then he turned away, muttering about checking on the bill. Grace didn't know it, but Henry had quietly paid every dime of Ellie's care, keeping it secret. As he stepped out, he glanced back at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. This fake marriage was starting to feel real, and he wasn't sure what to do about it. Grace Delaney's life was a whirlwind since signing that contract with Henry Caldwell. The $300,000 from Ellie Prescott had saved her grandmother's Brooklyn brownstone, but it came with a fake husband and a growing list of problems. She stood in her tiny Queens apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying Henry's quiet rescue from Derek Vaughn. He had been a steady presence since then, pedaling his beat-up bike to check on her, his green eyes always watching. She liked him more than she wanted to admit, but something about him didn't add up. He was too calm, too quick to step in. Still, she pushed the thought aside. He was just a guy with a big heart, right? Good news came a week later. Bright Future Designs called her back. The candidate they'd hired flaked, and Grace's portfolio had impressed them. She started as a junior designer, her first real shot at stability. The office was a cramped loft in Manhattan, filled with drafting tables and coffee-stained mugs. She threw herself into work, sketching plans for the Urban Horizon project, a massive redevelopment deal with Prescott Holdings. Her designs were bold, weaving green spaces into concrete towers, and her boss praised her vision. But not everyone was happy. Jessica Langston, a senior designer with a sharp tongue and sharper ambition, eyed Grace like a threat. "Nice work, newbie," Jessica said one day, her smile tight. "Don't get too comfortable." Grace nodded politely, ignoring the jab. Trouble brewed at home, too. Her uncle, Thomas Delaney, wasn't letting the brownstone go. He showed up at her apartment one evening, his suit wrinkled, his voice loud. "That house is worth $600,000, Grace. You've got $300 from who knows where, but I'm family. Sell it, split the cash, or I'll fight you in court." Grace stood firm, her hands clenched. "It's mine, Thomas. Grandma left it to me. You've got no claim," he sneered. "Half's mine by law, you'll see." He stormed out, leaving her rattled. That night she told Henry over coffee at his rented room. He leaned back, sipping from a chipped mug. "He's wrong," Henry said, his tone steady. "Inheritance laws in New York split evenly among siblings, but since your dad's gone, his share goes to you. Thomas gets half the estate, not the house itself. Fight him on it. Grace stared. How do you know that? He shrugged, tapping his bike helmet. I read a lot. You should talk to a lawyer. She frowned, his words too precise for a jobless guy. But she trusted him, and the next day she called a legal aid hotline. Henry was right. Thomas backed off for now, grumbling about lawsuits, but the house stayed hers. She thanked Henry with a shy smile, and he waved it off, pedaling away on his bike. Her doubts lingered, though. Who was he, really? At Bright Future, the Urban Horizon project heated up. Grace's designs were shortlisted, but Jessica swooped in. One morning, Grace found her sketches gone from her desk. At the team meeting, Jessica presented them as her own, her voice smooth as she pitched to the boss. We need bold ideas, she said, flashing Grace's work on the screen. This is mine. Grace's stomach dropped. She stood, her voice shaking. Those are mine. I drew them last week. Jessica laughed, loud and fake. Prove it, newbie. You're just jealous. The boss frowned but sided with Jessica, her seniority winning out. Grace sat, fuming as whispers spread. After work, she vented to Henry at the senior home where Ellie was recovering. She stole my work, Grace said, pacing. I can't prove it, but I know she did. Henry leaned against his bike, thoughtful. People like that trip over their own lies eventually. Keep your head up. You're better than her. His words were sharp, like he'd seen this before. Grace squinted at him. You sound like you've worked in an office. Nah, he said quickly, just common sense. She let it go, but the seed of suspicion grew. That weekend, Derek Vaughn struck again. Grace was grabbing a drink at a noisy Brooklyn bar, a rare night off, when he slid into the stool beside her. Hey, babe, he slurred, his breath sour with beer. Miss me? Leave me alone, Derek, she said, turning away. He grabbed her wrist, pulling her close. You owe me. That house money's half mine. Dump that loser husband and come back. Panic flared in her chest. The bar was packed, music thumping, no one noticing. Then a hand landed on Derek's shoulder. Henry, in a hoodie and cap, yanked him back. She said leave, he growled, his voice low but firm. Derek swung, but Henry dodged, shoving him into a table. Bottles crashed and Derek stumbled, cursing. You'll pay for this, he spat, staggering out. Grace exhaled, her hands trembling. How'd you know I was here? Saw your text about going out, Henry said, adjusting his cap. Figured I'd check in. Good thing I did. She nodded, grateful but unsettled. He was always there when she needed him, like he had a sixth sense. They walked home under flickering streetlights, his bike clattering beside them. You're too good to me, she said softly. He grinned, just doing my husband duties. She laughed, but her mind churned. He was more than he let on, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. The next blow came at the senior home. Grace visited Ellie, who was back from the hospital, her strength returning. As they chatted, a woman swept in, all heels and confidence. Vanessa Reed, tall and polished, hugged Ellie like family. Ellie, you look great, she said, then turned to Henry with a smirk. Hey, stranger. Vanessa, Henry said, his tone flat. Ellie clapped her hands. Grace, this is Vanessa. Her dad worked with my late husband. I used to joke she and Henry would be perfect together. Vanessa laughed, tossing her hair. Oh, Ellie, you and your matchmaking. Henry, you never call anymore. Grace's stomach twisted. Nice to meet you, she managed, forcing a smile. Vanessa's eyes flicked over her, dismissive. Henry's been busy, Ellie said, winking at Grace. He's got a wife now. Vanessa's smile froze. Wife, you're kidding. Nope, Henry said, wrapping an arm around Grace. This is her. Grace leaned into him, playing along, but Vanessa's words stung later. Ellie always thought we'd end up together, she'd said breezily before leaving. Grace watched her go, then turned to Henry. What was that about? Nothing, he said, too fast. She's just an old friend. Grandma likes to tease. But Grace wasn't so sure. Vanessa knew Henry well, better than she did, and his vague answers only fueled her doubts. That night, alone in her apartment, she replayed every moment with him. The legal advice, the bar rescue, the way he brushed off questions. He wasn't just some unemployed guy on a bike. She didn't have proof, but she felt it. Meanwhile, at Bright Future, Jessica gloated over her stolen victory. The Urban Horizon project was moving forward with her designs, and Grace was sidelined. She sketched late into the night, determined to fight back. Henry dropped by with takeout, his bike parked outside. "You'll get her," he said, handing her a carton of noodles. "She's not as smart as she thinks." Grace took the food, studying him. "You always know what to say." "Where'd you learn that?" He grinned, deflecting. "Years of watching bad TV." She smiled, but her suspicions deepened. Across town, Derek nursed a bruised ego, plotting his next move. Thomas sharpened his legal threats, and Vanessa lingered in Grace's mind, a polished shadow over her fake marriage. The walls were closing in, and Grace knew something had to give. She just didn't know how soon it would all unravel. Grace Delaney's world was teetering on the edge. Her fake marriage to Henry Caldwell had tangled her life in ways she never expected. The $300,000 from Ellie Prescott had saved her grandmother's Brooklyn brownstone, but now she faced Derek Vaughn's threats, Jessica Langston's betrayal at Bright Future Designs, and Vanessa Reed's smug hints about Henry's past. Grace couldn't shake the feeling that Henry was hiding something big. He was too sharp, too steady, always there when she needed him. She sat in her Queens apartment, sketching new designs late into the night, her mind buzzing with doubts. The Urban Horizon project was slipping through her fingers, and she needed a win. At Bright Future, tensions boiled over. The Urban Horizon project, a joint venture with Prescott Holdings, was nearing its final pitch. Grace had reworked her stolen designs, keeping handwritten copies this time, determined to fight back. But Jessica strutted around the office, basking in her fake glory. The boss scheduled a big meeting at Prescott Holdings' Manhattan headquarters, inviting the whole team to present to the client. "Jessica's leading this," he said, nodding at her. "Her vision's what they want." Grace clenched her jaw, her originals tucked safely in her bag. She'd get her chance, somehow. The day of the meeting arrived, crisp and cold. Grace took the subway to Manhattan, her stomach in knots. Prescott Holdings' tower loomed over the skyline, all glass and steel, a world away from her run-down life. Inside, the conference room buzzed with suits and laptops. Jessica stood at the front, clicking through slides of Grace's work, her voice dripping with confidence. "This is the future of urban design," she said, smiling at the Prescott execs. Grace sat in the back, her hands trembling with anger. She couldn't let this stand. Then a figure slipped in, helmet in hand, face shadowed. Grace squinted. It was Henry, but he'd never mentioned coming here. He caught her eye, nodding slightly, and took a seat near the execs. Jessica finished her pitch to polite applause, but Grace stood, her voice cutting through the room. "Those designs are mine," she said, loud and clear. "Jessica stole them from my desk." The room went silent. Jessica laughed, sharp and dismissive. "That's ridiculous. She's lying because she's jealous." "Prove it," Grace shot back, pulling out her handwritten drafts. She walked to the front, laying them on the table. "These are the originals. Check the dates." Jessica's face tightened, but she doubled down. "She faked those. I've got witnesses who saw me working late." A coworker nodded weakly, backing her up. The Prescott execs murmured, unsure. Then Henry stood, his helmet still under his arm. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked, his tone casual. An exec shrugged, handing him the drafts. He flipped through them, then turned to Jessica. "These have Grace's style all over them. I've seen her sketches. You, though, your work's sloppy." "Explain that," Jessica faltered. "Who are you to say that? Some bike courier?" Henry smiled faintly, setting the helmet down. "Not quite. I'm Henry Caldwell, CEO of Prescott Holdings." He pulled off his cap, revealing his face fully. The room gasped. Grace froze, her breath catching. "CEO? Her Henry?" Jessica stammered. "That's impossible. I'd know you." "You didn't," Henry said, his voice firm. "But I know a thief when I see one. We've got security footage of you at Grace's desk last week. Want me to play it?" Jessica's bravado crumbled. "I didn't mean it," she muttered. but Henry cut her off. "You're done here," he said. "Bright future, fire her or we pull the contract. And Jessica, you're blacklisted from every firm in this city." The boss nodded quickly, pale. Jessica grabbed her bag and bolted, the door slamming behind her. Grace stood there, dazed, as Henry turned to her. "Your designs are the real deal, Grace. You're leading Urban Horizon now." The execs clapped, but her mind spun. Henry was the CEO. Her fake husband ran Prescott Holdings. She managed a weak "thank you" before sinking into a chair, the meeting blurring around her. After, Henry found her in the lobby, his helmet back on like nothing had happened. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight. He nodded, and they took the subway back to Brooklyn, silent until they reached his rented room. Inside, he faced her, his expression soft but tense. "I'm sorry," he started. "I should have told you. I'm Henry Caldwell, yeah, the CEO. Grandma pushed this whole thing because she wanted me with someone real, not after my money. I didn't expect to care about you this much." Grace crossed her arms, her chest tight. "You lied to me. All this time, the bike, the broke act? Why?" "I didn't lie," he said, stepping closer. "I just didn't tell you everything. I wanted to see if you'd stick around without knowing. And you did. You cared about Grandma, about me, even when you thought I had nothing." She looked away, her thoughts a mess. "I suspected something, the way you handled Derek, the legal stuff, how you always showed up. But CEO? That's a different world." "I know," he said quietly. "I was scared you'd leave if you found out. I've seen people chase me for cash, not me. You're different." Before she could respond, a knock rattled the door. Henry opened it, and there stood Derek Vaughn with his mother, Marilyn. Derek's face was bruised from the bar fight, his eyes wild. "Grace, you're mine," he shouted, pushing in. "Dump this fraud and come back." Marilyn chimed in, her voice shrill. "She's a gold digger, son. She married him for money. 10 million, I bet." Grace stepped forward, furious. "I didn't even know he was rich, you idiots. Get out." Derek lunged, but Henry grabbed him, pinning him to the wall. "Touch her again and you're in jail," he growled. Marilyn shrieked, pulling Derek back. "She sent her thug after my boy," Marilyn wailed. "We're leaving, but this isn't over." They stumbled out, the door slamming. Grace sank onto the mattress, her hands shaking. Henry knelt beside her. "You okay?" "Yeah," she said, exhaling, "just overwhelmed." He sat next to her, close but not touching. "I meant it, Grace. I didn't want to lose you over this. You've been real with me from day one. That's why I stayed quiet." She met his eyes, seeing the truth there. "I knew you weren't broke," she admitted. "The bar, the hospital bills for Ellie, how you handled Jessica. I told myself you were just smart, not rich, but I stayed because you were good to me." "Not the money?" He smiled, small and relieved. "So where does that leave us?" Grace took a breath, her heart steadying. "I don't know yet, but I'm not running." Henry nodded, his hand brushing hers. "That's enough for now." They sat in silence, the weight of his secret lifting, but new questions loomed. Grace had her designs back, her house safe, and a husband who wasn't what he seemed. The fake marriage was over, but something real was starting, and neither knew what came next. Grace Delaney sat in Henry Caldwell's rented Brooklyn room, the air thick with the aftermath of his confession. He was no ordinary man on a bike. He was the CEO of Prescott Holdings, a truth that had shaken her to the core. Derek Vaughn and his mother, Marilyn, had stormed out minutes ago, their threats echoing in the cramped space. Grace's hands still trembled, but Henry's steady presence beside her calmed the storm inside. She had known he was more than he let on, had felt it in his quiet rescues and sharp advice. Now, with the mask off, she saw him clearly, and she wasn't walking away. The next morning, Grace woke to sunlight streaming through the cracked window. Henry was already up, frying eggs on a tiny stove, his bike helmet on the table. "Morning, wifey," he said with a grin, sliding a plate her way. She rolled her eyes but smiled, the nickname softer now. They ate in comfortable silence, the weight of yesterday settling into something manageable. "What now?" she asked, sipping burnt coffee. Henry leaned back, his green eyes thoughtful. "Up to you. Contract's done. You've got your house. I've got Grandma off my back. We could call it here." Grace set her mug down, her chest tightening. "Is that what you want?" He met her gaze, steady and sure. "No. I want you to stay. Not because of some deal, but because I've fallen for you, Grace. You're real. You stuck around when I was just a guy with a bike." Her breath caught. She'd felt it too, the pull growing through every late-night talk, every time he'd stood up for her. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly, "but no more secrets, okay?" "Deal," he said, his smile wide. "Starting today, you get the full Henry Caldwell." Life shifted after that. Grace threw herself into the Urban Horizon project, now officially hers. Prescott Holdings moved her to their Manhattan office, a sleek space with views of the skyline she'd help reshape. Her designs came to life, green rooftops and open plazas taking shape on paper. Henry was there too, running the company from the top floor, but he kept his distance at work, letting her shine. He still rode that beat-up bike, pedaling through Brooklyn to their new place, a modest apartment near the senior home. "Eco-friendly," he'd say with a wink when she teased him about it. Ellie Prescott was thrilled. Grace visited her often at the Brooklyn senior home, bringing coffee and stories about the project. Ellie's health was better, her spirit bright. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden, Ellie grabbed her hand. "You're good for him, Grace. I knew it that day in Queens. I don't need to live with you two, though. This place keeps me young." Grace laughed. "You're welcome anytime. Henry'd love it." Ellie winked. "Oh, he's got you now. That's enough for me." She stayed at the home most days, but her visits to their apartment grew frequent, her laughter filling the space. Grace cherished those moments, Ellie becoming the family she'd lost. But the past wasn't done with them. A week later, Grace got a call from Bright Future Designs. "Jessica's gone quiet," her old boss said. Whether Henry blacklisted her, no firm in the city will touch her. She's out of the game. Grace nodded, a weight lifting. Justice had caught up. Derek Vaughn's reckoning came harder. One evening, as Grace and Henry cooked dinner, a news alert pinged on her phone. "Local man faces charges after bar assault," the headline read. Derek's mugshot stared back, bruised and sullen. The bar fight Henry had broken up had been caught on camera, and Grace's statement to the police sealed it. He was looking at jail time, his threats silenced at last. Marilyn tried calling once, begging Grace to drop the charges, but she hung up. That chapter was closed. Vanessa Reed surfaced, too, a final loose end. Grace ran into her at the senior home during one of Ellie's card games. Vanessa approached, her heels clicking, her confidence dimmed. "Hey," she said, tucking her hair back. "I owe you an apology. I pushed the whole me and Henry thing too far. Ellie's old jokes got in my head. He's yours, Grace. I see that now." Grace studied her, then nodded. "Thanks, it's fine." Vanessa smiled faintly. "You're good for him. Take care." She walked off, and Grace let out a breath she didn't know she'd held. Another shadow faded. With the chaos behind them, Henry turned his focus to Grace. He started small, leaving flowers on her drafting table, taking her to quiet diners in Queens. One Saturday, he pedaled them to Prospect Park, a picnic basket strapped to his bike. They sat under an oak tree, the city hummed distant. "I've been thinking," he said, pulling out a small box. Grace's heart skipped. "Henry, what's this?" she asked, her voice shaky. He opened it, revealing a simple diamond ring glinting in the sun. "Our contract's over, but I don't want us to be. Grace Delaney, will you marry me for real? Not for a year, but for, say, 10,000 years?" She laughed, tears pricking her eyes. 10,000 years? That's a stretch. "I'm serious," he said, his grin softening. "I love you. You saw me when I was nobody, and you stayed." Grace took the ring, sliding it on. "I love you too, Henry. You're more than a CEO or a guy on a bike. You're mine." She leaned in, kissing him as the park faded around them. The yes hung unspoken, but he felt it in her touch. They married quietly a month later, just them, Ellie, and a handful of friends in the senior home's garden. Ellie cheered loudest, her voice cracking with joy. "Told you she was the one," she said, nudging Henry. He laughed, pulling Grace close. The ring sparkled on her finger, a promise beyond any contract. Their new life settled into a rhythm. Grace led Urban Horizon to completion, her name on every blueprint. Henry ran Prescott Holdings, still biking to work, a habit he wouldn't quit. Ellie popped by with cookies or gossip, her visits a highlight. The brownstone stayed in Grace's hands, a piece of her past preserved. Derek sat in a cell, Jessica faded into obscurity, and Vanessa moved on. The world righted itself. Justice served, love won. One night, as they sat on their apartment's tiny balcony, Grace rested her head on Henry's shoulder. The city glittered below, a tapestry of lights. "You ever miss the old days?" she asked, tracing his hand. "When I thought you were broke?" He chuckled, kissing her forehead. "Nah, this is better. You, me, Grandma popping in. It's real." She smiled, the weight of her old life gone. That day in Queens, helping Ellie, had sparked it all. A chance act of kindness led her to Henry, to a love she never saw coming. The house was safe, her career soared, and her heart was full. 10,000 years sounded ambitious, but with Henry beside her, Grace believed they could make it.